Today I thought I would chat about online trends because living in an online world, I'm constantly seeing amazing new patterns, new platforms, or new techniques that other business owners are doing. And quite often I find myself thinking, "Oh, maybe I should be doing that too. That looks like fun. That looks like it could work really well." But I have discovered over time that actually not all trends are meant for me. And so I thought I could share with you some of the sense checks that I go through when I'm looking at trends and deciding whether or not to jump into them. Hi, my name is Sonia. I chat about running a gentle business, being creative, and navigating midlife. So, I guess one of the first things to talk about with trends is that we are exposed to a trend quite a lot in modern day life. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. The first is that we have a cognitive bias towards these things, which is called the frequency illusion. So once you have seen something, especially if you're interested in it, you're more aware of it. And as a result, you're more likely to see it. And on top of that, if we see it online, quite often it's on a social media channel, and the algorithm will then keep pushing that item to us more and more and more. So we almost get caught in a bubble where we're just seeing this thing all of the time. And especially if it's a viral pattern, like I got caught up with the sailor slippers just before Christmas, and everyone is talking about how amazing it is, or how well it's working for them, or how quick it was to make. And so you kind of get caught up with that enthusiasm too, and then you get that sense of FOMO. And within our internet bubble, I think it's so easy to think that everyone in the world is doing it, whereas actually online we tend to interact with people that have similar interests to us. And this was highlighted to me just before Christmas actually, because I see a lot of people talking about AI and using chat GPT, and in my mind everyone in the world uses it. And I was chatting with a friend who's not really online, and I mentioned chat GPT, and she was like, "What's that then?" And so it's just worth remembering that sometimes, although we think everyone in the world is taking part in making this item or joining a platform, that isn't always the case. The number one thing that I try and remind myself when I'm looking at all these amazing new things that are coming out is that it's a distraction from doing the work that I actually need to do. I think as a creative myself, I get as much fun searching for the next project that I could make as I do from actually trying to finish the projects that I've got. But if I look at my behavior when I am looking for new things, quite often it's because I have hit a roadblock on a project that I'm currently making. Maybe it's taking longer than I thought, and so I'm getting a little bit bored with it, or I've reached a tricky stage with it and I don't know how to move past that. And so looking for something new takes me away from having to worry about that. But actually, that project is still living in my head and taking up space, and it kind of becomes not just physical clutter in my sewing space, but also mental clutter that means that I kind of lose motivation if I'm not careful. And from a business point of view, it can actually split my focus quite a lot. So I've noticed since the beginning of the year that a lot of creators are moving on to Substack. I think Jenna Kutcher was kind of the big name, and then it seemed like everyone else was doing it because I'd noticed Jenna was doing it, and so I kept seeing adverts from other people that were moving over to Substack too. And I spent a bit of time looking at whether or not I should go on to Substack as well. But if I have a business plan and I'm then starting to look at something which was not in my plan to start with, it's not to say that it shouldn't be, but actually it distracts me from what I do need to be doing. And the thing is, if we split our focus on things that we're making or things that we are doing, it slows down our progress, because ultimately, every yes that we say to something is a no to something else. So if I say yes to starting a new project, I'm saying no to finishing all of the projects that I currently have going. And so I'm trying to become more mindful about being realistic about the time that I have to spend on projects, what is causing me to be distracted, and looking at how easy is that fix, because quite often things are a quicker fix than I think they are if I actually sit down and do them. Which leads me on to my second sense check, which is the fact that I am not other people. And this is something that I am constantly having to remind myself of. So just before Christmas, I got caught up with the sailor slippers hype, and I watched a few YouTube videos on it, which is investing my time, stopping me from doing other things. And people were saying they took about 6 hours to make. And I was like, brilliant, I could make at least 4 pairs before Christmas. Well, I did not make 4 pairs before Christmas, and I'm still making them now. But it's that fact that it might take someone else 6 hours, but they might be a really quick knitter. It takes me longer than 6 hours, and that's okay. But I have to remind myself to judge a project or a platform or a task by my ability and my time and how I work, rather than getting swept up in someone else's. I think dressmaking is a really good example of this as well, because I see some amazing patterns that look so cute on other people, but when I really look at it, it doesn't really suit my lifestyle. It doesn't suit trampling across the fields with the dog, or it doesn't suit my body shape. And over time, I've become a lot clearer about what it is I like to wear, what suits my wardrobe, and I'm able to kind of look at it and go, oh, that's really cute. I love what everyone's doing with them, but it's not for me. But it has taken time. And I think some of that comes down from maybe age, but also down to, I think earlier in my creative journey, I wanted to make everything and try everything. And as I've gone through, I've become a lot clearer about what I like and what I don't like, and maybe not as excited to try out all the different skills and the techniques. So it has got easier, but it is a constant thing that I'm having to remind myself of. The other thing with comparing ourselves to others is looking at what our own personal strengths are. So we've talked about skill, we've talked about style, but the other thing is, what are we naturally good at? And I think this is especially important if you're looking at trends in the business sphere, because, if I go back to the Substack example, it might be that someone is a really good writer and they can put together an article in half a day, and they love reading everybody else's articles and communicating and networking on that platform. Whereas for me, maybe it takes me a whole day and I don't want to be reading articles all of the time. And that would mean that if I did join Substack in this example, I would be spending so much time and effort on something that is never really going to work for me. And I talked about this a bit in my first video on choosing a gentle business, but recognizing your own skills and your own strengths, and then referencing them against the decisions that you're going to make, does take practice, but it's such a valuable thing to do. And it is something, I think once you've made a decision not to proceed, it's not to say you should never do it, because we change, things change, but kind of give yourself half an hour to look into it and then decide whether or not to bench it or to proceed with it. But don't just keep letting it take up space in your mind and stopping you from doing all of the other things that you could be doing. Because I think the final thing to think about is, whether or not there is something bigger behind the trend, especially within the business space. So, for example, I think part of the reason that people are moving towards Substack and YouTube is it's the beginning of a new year, and so maybe people have got that as their target, or, area for growth. But sometimes there's an underlying trend that is encouraging people to go there. So my personal view at the moment is that people are moving towards Substack because it's a newsletter as well as a post forum, and people are spending less time on social media, I think, and so it's a way of connecting with customers and getting straight into their inbox. But there are other ways of doing that. So if that is a drive for you in terms of, you want to get more people on your newsletter list, what are the other ways that you could do that? There's normally a few different ways of achieving it, but just having a look at the bigger picture for things can be useful. So if you've not met him before, this is Loki. So I thought I'd have a quick chat about the sailor slippers because that's a trend I fell for fairly recently, just before Christmas. I'd started to see the pattern everywhere and they look like a really fun make, ideal for Christmas. I've got people that need slippers. I could do with some slippers, and it's not something that I have in my existing pattern library. So whenever I'm looking at making a new pattern, I always like to do a bit of research and discover if there are any kind of commonalities across the people's reviews. So does it run big, does it run small, and also look at whether or not it's something that would probably suit me. And the slippers were kind of easy, the reviews were all really good, so I bought enough yarn to make 5 pairs in total, with the plan that I'd make 4 before Christmas. And I made 2. And I think part of that is because I hadn't really thought about the fact that it's not for me an easy knit, in terms of I tend to knit at night and the increases and the decreases vary by different people, and so it's not something that's intuitive and it takes a bit of looking at, so that has slowed me down a bit. But I've nearly finished my 3rd pair now, and then it will be a purple pair for me, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, that was a trend that I'm glad I joined in with, and I'm having lots of fun making all the slippers. I hope you've enjoyed my mini checklist of the things that I go through when I'm looking to buy a new pattern or take my business in a slightly different direction. And I'd love to know if there's anything else that you do in your decision making process, because I find it really interesting to kind of see what people do. And if you have bought into a trend lately, I'd love to know what it is. I will show you the progress on my sailor slippers in the video at the end. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do give me a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.